When Medicare recently released their handbook for beneficiaries for 2021, they included a section about acupuncture and the fact that it was now covered in certain circumstances. And so, of course, our doctors are getting questions, and then you're calling us and asking, what is this and how can we get reimbursed for this and what does this look like? And so this video is really going to cover that. We're not going to cover when it can be covered and for what exact purposes. Instead, I want to cover exactly who can do this, because I think that will answer the vast majority of the question. The short answer is this. Odds are for chiropractic physicians, you're just simply not going to be able to be reimbursed by Medicare. In other words, it's not going to be reimbursable. Acupuncture is for your Medicare patients if you perform that task. It's just really that simple. Now, are there circumstances where it's possible? Yes, there are going to be certain circumstances, extremely limited, where they are. And so in this video, I'm going to cover exactly what those protocols are, what the requirements are about who can actually bill acupuncture to Medicare and expect reimbursement. So here's the way it's laid out. The way they laid it out is they said, who can do this carte blanche without the additional restrictions and requirements? It's physicians, but then here's the bad part. What they did is they referenced their definition of physician. Now, of course, in Illinois, you are physicians. Chiropractic physicians are licensed as physicians under the Medical Practice Act of 1987. But under federal law, everything changes. We already know this. We've been fighting this. That's what House Resolution 3654 is designed to correct, is the definition of physician. And the way it works is right now, here's how they have defined in the section that they reference physicians under Medicare law. It says physicians may furnish acupuncture in accordance with applicable state regulations. However, then it goes on to say the term physician, when used in connection with the performance of any function or action, means a chiropractor, but only with respect to the treatment by means of manual manipulation of the spine to correct a subluxation. In other words, the only time that Medicare considers chiropractic physicians to be physicians is when you're actually adjusting the spine to correct a subluxation. That's it. Not for any other services. So under this definition, when we're talking about acupuncture, since acupuncture is not the manual manipulation of the spine to correct a subluxation, then at that stage, you would not be able to be considered a physician. And so we have to continue to read to see what are the other possibilities then. Do I fall in a different category? There is another category, and it is for physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, and auxiliary personnel. Now, they have another set of requirements then for those particular three groups. So PAs, APNs, and auxiliary personnel. So we're not physician's assistants and we're not nurse practitioners. And so the only other category that we fall into is that auxiliary personnel category, because again, because of the reasons I just gave a few minutes ago, we're not physicians for acupuncture according to federal Medicare law for reimbursement purposes. So again, for the state, yes, we're physicians, but not for the sake of this particular statute. So then what else? How does this work? What are the requirements for those three groups of people? Well, first of all, you either have to have a master's or a doctorate level degree in acupuncture or oriental medicine from a school accredited by ACAOM. So you have to have a doctorate or a master's degree in acupuncture. That's clear. And in addition to that, you have to have a current, full, active, unrestricted license to practice acupuncture in the state. And so ultimately, you have to have an acupuncture license and you have to have that doctorate and master's degree. You have to have both in acupuncture. Now, by the way, that's how we cover the generalities of PAs and APNs. So the PAs and APNs would also have to have that doctorate or master's level degree and an unrestricted license to practice acupuncture in the state. For auxiliary personnel, they actually even go a step further, because remember, now we're not an APN, we're not a PA, we're not a physician under Medicare law for this purpose. So we only fall under auxiliary personnel. So what are the additional restrictions for auxiliary personnel? Well, auxiliary personnel have to be under the appropriate level of supervision, and the supervision has to be performed by an APN, a PA, an MD, or a DO. That's really the way it comes down. That's the way it's crafted into this. Now, here's the problem. What they say for the appropriate level of supervision is they point you back to some other provisions of federal law, and those read a lot more restrictive than what you may think. And here's what it says. In general, services and supplies must be furnished under direct supervision of the physician or other practitioner, so in this case, APN or PA, However, only the supervising physician or the practitioner may bill Medicare for the incident to services. So, in theory, even if you could meet that, you can't bill for it. They would have to be billed under the MDDO, APN, or PA's license. But then it goes on to say direct supervision in the office setting means the physician or the other practitioner must be present in the office suite and immediately available to furnish assistance and direction throughout the performance of the procedure. Well, that clearly indicates that whoever's doing the supervising must also have full training. Now, we already know that APNs and PAs would have to have that master's or doctorate level anyway to even do the supervising, right? But even the MDs and DOs would have to have and meet standard of care to be able to provide acupuncture. So they're going to have training as well. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about is even the supervision would have to be performed by somebody who has extensive knowledge and understanding and experience in acupuncture. And that's the only way. So at the end of the day, as we summarize what all of this looks like, ultimately, the only way that a chiropractic physician would be able to actually bill Medicare and expect to have reimbursement would be if they're furnishing these services, right? If you're furnished a service, you would have to be working under the direct supervision of an MD, DO, APN, or PA. And if it's APN or PA, then they also have to have that master's or doctorate level. You would also have to have a master's or doctorate level and an acupuncturist license in Illinois. So quite candidly, to be able to meet all of these requirements, it just isn't practical. And the reality of this is it's not an Illinois issue. We have an incredibly broad scope of practice, and we can even argue about the license, but you can't argue about the other two major provisions, which is the master's or doctorate level degree, as well as the supervision requirement that's in the statute because of the direct references they give the statute and what the federal statute indicates in those particular areas. So at the end of the day, this isn't an Illinois specific issue. This is a national issue. And the sheer number of chiropractic physicians across the board that can actually be able to bill this and get reimbursed for it are extremely limited. So what do you do in those cases, knowing now that odds are you're not going to be able to bill and get reimbursed? And for the vast majority of the doctors, that's what we're talking to. When the patient comes in and says, I really want you to bill Medicare for these services, my book says that you can't. In these cases, you should append the GY modifier, which tells Medicare that it is not a statutorily covered service. Additionally, if you want to have that extra mile, you could get an ABN form signed right at that stage, and then also append the GA modifier to the billing as well. But the GY modifier really should take care of you in that particular instance because it's not a statutorily covered service, because the person who's performing it can't statutorily perform that service according to Medicare for reimbursement purposes. So, but you could, as just additional protection, append both the GY and the GA modifier to those. Make sure if you're appending the GA modifier that you do get an appropriate level of ABN form signed for acupuncture. And I believe that's what you need to know in regards to Medicare and acupuncture, in regards to who can actually perform those services. And we'll catch you next week.